Hello and welcome to the Race Dilemma podcast. My name is Drew Hawley and I'm here with my brother and co-host Daniel Sloan. This podcast is really about giving a voice to those people of a mixed heritage, initially within our own family whose racial background is not always obvious due to their pale skin colour, and have found themselves to be at the centre of a personal race dilemma, and at times having to prove their ethnic credentials in order to be heard.
And of course, we have broadened the conversation out into the many corners of some of the so-called problems of being from a racially mixed background. And if you feel you may want to contribute or have a story to tell and would like to be featured on an episode, please reach out to us on the Race Dilemma podcast at gmail.com. And if you really like these episodes, please rate us and leave a review on Apple Podcasts, and feel free to share with your family and friends.
Hello once again and welcome to this episode of the Race Dilemma podcast. And today we welcome our cousin Esther, currently living in the States but originally from Hayes in West London. Esther, you're whereabouts are you? You are near Chicago, or is it 50 miles from Chicago?
A little bit more. We're in northwest Indiana, just not far from the border with Illinois.
Just to give the listeners some background, Esther, your dad, Freddie, was our mum's brother.
Yes.
Right? He was a little older than our mum. He met your mum, our Auntie Gerda, in the late 1950s on a blind date, I believe.
Yes, it was.
Someone didn't turn up. Your dad took his place. Your mum and dad met. They fell bang in love, and they were bang in love for forever after that.
Yes, they couldn't separate them, and they used to go everywhere together.
We sort of, as a kid, I don't know if you felt it, Andrew, but it was unconscious, a lot of the stuff. But they were always sort of meant to be together, weren't they, your mum and dad?
They made it work. And it can't have been easy back in the day.
They made it work because they loved each other.
I think we need to give our listeners some background on Esther, as in your mixed heritage. So, like Daniel said, your father, our uncle, was Pakistani, and your mother, German?
German, yeah, mainly German, but her mum was Latvian.
Because your mum was actually born in Latvia, though, wasn't she?
She was, yeah.
Yeah.
Riga, Latvia.
That's right. And as you said, to use your words, that it wasn't very easy for them back in the day. They had lots of problems, especially when they went back to Germany to visit families. There was always that stuff going on there with the German people that didn't really welcome your dad in the way that they should have. And whenever I speak to Angela, your sister, and you've mentioned as well, that time you going back to Germany for holidays seems to stand out for you. There's a story there. There's always memories there of not being treated very well with your mum and dad anyway.
Yes. I mean, I was younger. I'm 8 years younger than my sister, so she probably would have realised more how people treated us. But yeah, they would kind of stop and stare. They weren't used to mixed race families, and it was something unusual, and so they would blatantly stop and stare at us if we were walking down the street or going shopping.
Or did it feel all right to you? Did you just shrug it off, or did it feel?
I wasn't as aware of it because I was younger, and kind of in the later years when I was a teenager, maybe I'm naive. I didn't really see it so much. When we went back with Aisha, my daughter, who is also mixed race, she's half Nigerian.
What?
We went to a swimming pool, and there was another black family there, and there was some incident. I didn't understand what was going on because I don't understand German fluently like my mum does, but mum kind of chimed in and told these boys to be quiet, or I don't know what she said, but they were kind of...
What year would this have been then?
This, I think Aisha may have been 5, so maybe 2000 or thereabouts.
I was going to say. So that stuff was, yeah.
still going on.
Yeah.
Even
it maybe
then.
didn't leave. It's probably more prominent there, isn't it, than it is here.
Yeah, I think that's probably why Mum wouldn't want to go back to live in Germany.
Yeah.
Then they're not as tolerant, I think. If that's kind of word you want to use. I don't know.
Yeah.
But going back to like when you were a kid, like was there a point where you were aware of your own sort of mixed heritage? Or was there like a situation or a time in school where you were like, okay, I'm not like the Indian Pakistani kids, or I'm not like the white kids? Like,
yeah, I think in primary school I didn't fit in either camp, as you say.
Yeah.
So I never had a kind of best friend in primary school. In secondary school, I did a bit more, but in primary school, and I would kind of at playtime when we go out, I would play with both groups, but I wouldn't necessarily have
allegiances to either group.
No.
Were you aware that there were two groups in Esther? Do you think about there being two groups?
Well, they used to, kind of spend time in groups in the playground. It was quite obvious, I think, most of the time that.
Oh, was it?
It wasn't segregation. They just chose to be, with their own people, if you like. But
and is that where your dilemma came into it? Did you feel a bit torn between?
In a way, but in a way I could relate to both sides. I couldn't fully relate, but I could relate a bit to both sides. So
when you went to school, you said that you're 8 years you're 8 years younger than Angela. And when she went to school, did she go to the same school as you?
No, she went to the same primary school.
Was it different by the time you got to school? Was there more Asians there?
I think there were more Asians.
Yeah.
I believe there were.
Did you feel split between the two camps, as you put it then?
In a way, but I mean, just trying to think. I liked my own company anyway, so I didn't mind spending time on my own and not having, a particular friend that I had to spend all the time with. But it didn't bother me really. I mean, I used to hear some name calling and stuff, but I don't think it was directed at me. I mean, they used to use the words, I don't know, I think it's probably not used anymore, half caste.
Oh, yeah.
And they would, say, oh, are you half caste?
Yeah.
And I'd probably say yes, because, my mum was white, my dad was brown, so...
Yeah. It's an awful word, isn't it? And we used to, that was the same when I was a kid. They used to use that word, and it was mainly towards kids who had a West Indian dad and a white mum, or the other way around. Usually that mix, and they used to use that word when describing them. And it was kind of
or coloured,
or half coloured, but half caste was it's an awful word, isn't it? But it was very popular. It was a very popular word.
But people never saw it as being
not at all.
Not
at all. No, that was kind of it. It was. Yeah, or they'd use the word coloured because it sounded less offensive than saying black, because if you said the word black, that was awful. Did you feel was any racism directed towards you? I suppose what Andrew was going to ask, right?
Yeah.
Generally, I was accepted by both sides, but not really fully integrated either way.
Yeah. So the transition from primary school to secondary school was sort of easier as well, because you felt okay about stuff.
Yeah, and there were a group of kids in my class who all went into the same class, and so it wasn't difficult for me that I can remember.
I know when I went to school, I felt that I really did feel, although I knew that I was made to feel different, although I didn't feel personally different, but it was sort of foisted upon me, this difference that I didn't really want to feel. I had no choice but to feel it because people said stuff.
Yeah.
that made you feel it. There was a real imbalance there. It was a real, imbalance of power, if you like, and from the white kids.
I mean, like for me, like Esther, I didn't really experience anything until actually someone called me the P word, and then that was probably a turning point for me, where I was like, okay, my dad's white and my mum's Pakistani, and it sort of created a little bit of confusion at the time, but it was just it kind of made me aware that actually there are people who are prejudiced against, someone like myself who is mixed as well.
I remember Angela's friends coming to the house one time, coming to see Angela, and I remember thinking about it at the time. I don't know why I thought about it, but when Nana was there with our grandma, when Nana was there with her sari on, milling about the place, coming to sit down in the living room and having a cup of tea, and Angela's friends were there, I remember thinking at that time, young as I was, they must realise now who we are and where our background's from.
Yeah, I think that was the difference as well. Nana lived with us in the house, and anyone who came in and out the house would meet her and know her and grow to love her as well.
Yeah. But I'm talking about Angela's friends. I can remember thinking they must realise that she's Asian. That with her sorry, it was an incident. I remember, not an incident, but there was a time when I sort of became a little bit conscious of that and I thought about it at the time.
Yeah. No, I think I was conscious of it as well, and it was something that other families didn't have their nan living with them, and
Asian families tend to have the extended family living.
They do.
It's quite multi-generational.
But to us, it was just normal, wasn't it? To us, it was just normal.
Yeah.
So really, there was no sort of dilemma for you. You felt quite comfortable in your race, in your background, and in your home. You didn't feel awkward when you were out. You didn't feel out of place when you went to school or with your other friends.
No, because I didn't feel at some point, I think I wish I had a best friend, or why can't I kind of be invited to all the groups and I was sometimes, but I did feel different, but I didn't mind being alone either.
Do you think it was because you felt you didn't fit in, or was that your nature? Was it nurture or nature? What
maybe a bit of both. But at the same time, it made me appreciate kind of both cultures.
Yeah.
And I could kind of be a halfway house, I don't know, in between.
Yeah. Would you say it was quite a happy childhood?
Yes.
That's good. That's nice to hear, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, at home, because Angela was that much older than me, I would sit under the table and play and draw, and
that's right.
I was used to being in my own company.
It seems to me that the ethos of your school, or the kids in your school and your class anyway, didn't make you feel awkward in any way about yourself. You didn't feel uncomfortable. You didn't feel ashamed. You were not out of place as such, I don't think.
No. And I tended to study hard, especially in primary school. I was in the top group, and there were a group of us in the top group who went out to special classes and kind of did higher learning, if you like. So kind of, I don't know, it didn't bother me. I would fit with other oddballs like myself, and
so not fitting into any particular group was in your nature. That went in your favour as such, didn't it? Because you could actually choose to have whatever type of friends that you did, and you did.
Yeah.
Well, I always saw you as pretty outgoing and bubbly and very friendly. I always saw you like that as my older cousin.
With the kind of the dancing and that, which I grew up doing, and I had confidence, but not always confidence in the right way. Sometimes you can use it as a mask as well.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you look really. I mean, you studied performing arts, right, at the London studio,
Mm-hmm.
where you got your degree there in performing arts. And I remember coming to see you at the Wimbledon Theatre for your end of college, your end of university show. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, we did Showboat, and I had one of the lead roles. And as you mentioned before, that character is
The part that Ava Gardner played. Yeah.
yes, is a mixed race.
Yeah, she's mixed, yeah. How long afterwards did you have Aisha? How long after that?
Aisha came along at 26 when I was 26. Yeah, so 5 years after that.
Okay. And the reason I mention Aisha, because Aisha's father is Nigerian, right?
Yes.
And so then Aisha, your daughter, is this other mix of Nigerian, Asian, German, Latvian, all in the very lovely looking, beautiful girl. And we were just talking before this podcast, wondering if Aisha felt any of those things that we've been talking about, whether she felt any problems at all, where she went to the same school as you, still lives in the old house with your mum.
Mm-hmm.
Wonder if she faced it, because I don't think they were that, well, I don't know anyone of that nationality mix anywhere, let alone where she lives.
No, I mean, in her secondary school, there are other mixed race girls. And she had more of a mix in the school as well. There were more black kids as well. Whereas when I was growing up, it was Asian, predominantly Asian and white. But there weren't many black kids yet in the area.
Yeah.
And she had a large group of friends, all of, mixed, white, black, mixed race.
Well, it all sounds pretty positive, doesn't it?
Yeah.
To me, it sounds pretty positive.
Which is good.
Yeah, it is good. And I think it makes a difference, especially in school, when there's a real mixture of kids from different backgrounds, different nationalities, and they don't bring those prejudices into the school so much. So it seems.
Yeah.
And it was different when my kids went to school around here in South London. It was different. In the suburbs of South London, it felt different. I mean, they're 30 now, for 31 and 29. So when they were in school 20 years ago, it was different in this part of the world yet again.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the whole race thing is definitely determined by area and generation as well, Definitely.
I think there's still some of the older generation. And I do remember an incident when I was in my 20s. I don't know where I was going. I think I was coming back on the bus from Hay Station or something. And there was a very elderly lady sat down, and she was grumbling under her breath, and she was saying the P word. And I said, well, I'm a P. Yeah. So, what do you say? And she kind of just grumbled under her breath again. And I thought, it's just not worth it. Ignorance, you can't kind of change a person like that. They're going to stick with their views. And
it sounds as though you're pretty strong, Esther. Sounds as though that, when it came along, you were able to deal with it.
Yeah, I don't think it changed her in any way, but no. I just felt I had to say something because I wasn't putting up with her grumbling.
So apart from that, you don't feel that any time in your life you were judged by how you looked, by your slightly olive skin, your brown hair, your obvious Asian, not obvious, somewhat of an Asian background?
Not really. I mean, I could get away with being Greek, Italian, Spanish, wherever I went, I would, are you this? Are you that? Yeah. No. Mm-hmm. And then I would say what I am.
Yeah.
So what was it like being in a relationship with Aisha's father from a race perspective?
There were a lot of mixed race couples already, so it didn't.
It was quite
appear
normal
to be an issue when we were out and about. But yeah, I've not really thought about that for a while.
Probably more cultural differences and more than anything.
Yes,
stronger.
Yeah, definitely cultural differences. And I learned about that culture as well, but not sure I was entirely accepted there either.
Is that right? How about Aisha? Is she accepted?
She loves her Nigerian side, and she cooks Nigerian food, and
And where you're living now, like what is it like from a multicultural point of view?
Okay.
Would you say your area is like, is there mixed race couples? Is it predominantly one way or the other?
I've seen one mixed race couple, but it is predominantly white.
Oh, is it?
But you go 10 miles down the road to Michigan City, which is a larger area, and it's multicultural there. A lot of Mexican, a lot of African American.
People must think you're Mexican as well, Esther. They must think you're Mexican as well, no?
Sometimes they'll start talking to me in Spanish, and I say, no, I'm not Mexican. So, yeah.
Or they think you're Australian.
Oh, yeah, there is Australian as well. And so, I haven't had an issue here.
That's good.
But then I am very westernized, so I don't wear saris and
well, you never have.
Every day.
Even though you haven't had anything massively happen to you that would have affected you, but it's you still are of that, a product of your mum and dad. You still are you.
And I think growing up as we did, you appreciate Asian families and the Asian culture.
Yeah.
But you know what it's like to be, westernized as well. So it's kind of a bit of both.
Esther, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Race Dilemma podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us on today's episode. If you've liked what you've heard, please subscribe on your favourite directory. And if you've liked it even more, then please rate us and leave a review on Apple Podcasts.
Again, if you would like to be featured on the Race Dilemma podcast, please reach out to us on theracedilemmapodcast@gmail.com. That's it from us, and we'll see you on the next episode.